I think we should play Where in the World is Carl Franklin?
Where in the world is... Hey, Carl.
What?
Where are you?
I'm in Oslo.
Hey, Carl.
It's a town in Minnesota.
I was going to say, where's Oslo?
You know what the secret to comedy is? Go ahead, ask me. Go ahead.
What's the secret of comedy?
I can't even do it. Comedy. I almost said comedy.
That was perfect.
Comedy.
What's the secret to comedy?
Comedy.
The answer is timing.
It makes total sense.
It's the interrupting cow joke, but for grown-ups. Yeah, so I'm in Oslo. How you guys doing?
Good.
I'm fantastic.
We're not in Oslo.
Yeah, we're not in Oslo, but it's still fantastic.
We're in undisclosed locations.
Yeah.
Respective bunkers.
I'm at the Norwegian Developers Conference, and it does occur to me that we have a little bit of a delay, and that is why we're going to have some unplanned comic timing, unintentional timing.
I like
comedy. Yeah.
Yes.
So
timing.
Everything's good. Everything's good here. Let's just jump into these stories because we do have a few of them. So the first one is Optus in Australia, and Troy Hunt actually posted this, and he's skeptical, shall we say, of the claim. Optus rejects insider claims of human error as possible factor in hack affecting millions of Australians. He's like, nah, come on, really?
Yeah.
The article clearly states that they put an API out on the internet. That's human error.
Oh, so yeah, it's an interesting point because you're either a really terrible security architect and they're a the telecom. They're a telco. So chances are they have really, really bright engineers.
Yes.
Hell, every hacker I've ever met works for a telco.
Yeah.
So more likely, this is absolutely human.
So that was completely bollocks what you just said, and that's why it's funny, but nobody laughed.
So, Patrick.
Yes.
APIs. I know we've talked about them in the past, right?
Yeah. So APIs are really awesome as long as you don't put them on the internet.
But some of them have to be on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you really don't want the problem with an API is if you look at a web page, you can typically tell like what kind of information is on the menu with an interface. With an API, the sky's kind of the limit, and there's unexpected consequences. It's a dream for someone like yourself.
Yes. Oh, we love APIs.
Well, there's two kinds of APIs. There's a read-only API, which just downloads data.
Yep.
And I would say those are safe for the internet. But the API that accepts updates and inserts and deletes, those are the kind of APIs that are classic for getting hacked.
I will tell you, though, Carl, I even love the read-only APIs.
As a hacker?
Yeah, because 99% of hacking... I'm gonna put this secret out here. Most people don't know this about hacking because they look at the movies and they see the I'm in and that they think that's the 99% right there.
Right.
But before they say I'm in, 99% of hacking happens. And what that part is called is information gathering. It is so 100% like a read-only API. We actually were just working with a customer last week where they had a read-only API that you had access to. But the problem is it was unfettered access to read almost anything we wanted. So we could say, why don't you tell us all of the other keys that have access to this database? Why don't you tell us every single customer record in this database? Why don't you give us access to all of the login names? So even though it was read-only, the information we gathered from there gave us so much information that it made it much easier for us to breach the site.
I see. Well, in my case, I have a read-only API for metadata for the podcasts. And it's just media data, right? It's titles and descriptions. It's public stuff. There's no sensitive data in there at all. So that is a read-only API that now I want to hire Dwayne to try to hack. because I want to know if he can actually hack it.
You don't have to hire me, Carl. I hack you.
Oh,
all the
you've
time.
already hacked it, though. Okay.
No. Carl follows the right procedures. I mean, honestly, having something where you have only publicly accessible data, or you're just really the data that could be pulled is not sensitive. And that's the key. Yep. A lot of times what we see is people will take their database and have an API that allows access to see, hey, should you have access to this page or whatnot, but then has access to all other sorts of things in the database.
Right.
You want to be careful what data you put there.
Yeah.
In this particular case, interestingly enough, they were implementing a new API to meet 2FA standards and that sort of stuff for the industry. Good. Glad they're looking at security. Glad they're trying to, make the database more secure. But in doing that testing, they actually attached it to a test network that had access to the internet. And that's where this went wrong.
Which is the human error.
Yes.
So this is pure spin to say it's not human error, because it's not like the software attached itself to a network connected to the internet.
I love that.
So I agree with Troy.
Hey, Patrick, this isn't human error because the firewall let them in.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's the firewall.
Yeah.
It's the firewall's fault.
It's the internet's fault.
Humans don't allow hackers. Firewalls allow hackers. Right?
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Carl.
I'm just trying to appeal to Patrick, with his Second Amendment thing.
America.
Firewalls kill people.
America. All right.
Yes.
Troy Hunt married, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
heard about that.
congratulations to
Troy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe now we can get him on our show. I'd like to have Troy on the show.
That'd be awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know why being married now is like
You know what? I've never actually had a conversation with Troy. I'm just saying.
Really?
I've been in the same circles.
I think you did when we were all MVPs. We were dev security MVPs together for a few years. I thought you met him then.
It's possible I did.
I think we were on some threads. So let's switch to criminals getting their comeuppances. So Dwayne's least favorite segment.
I know, right?
Yeah, the Uber hacker, the teenage Uber hacker got nailed.
I admit, I didn't believe he was really a 17-year-old that did both of these, and I thought that was a false flag. But apparently, once you raid his house, it turns out he's 17.
Mom, I'm hacking a site.
So I think Patrick is silently sort of advocating we raid 17-year-olds' houses as a precautionary measure.
Well, actually, the last 6 months kind of shows that might actually work, because two of the last two biggest hackers in history in the last 6 months have been 17-year-olds or 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
in the UK.
I look around my family and my wife's family, and there definitely are some hermit-like teenage boys that sort of hang out in their rooms and they don't come out and they play games or do whatever they do. Gotta watch those guys.
Oh yeah. Heck yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is interesting in that, the kid obviously knows what he's doing. He knows the ways around certain security systems, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And hey, as I was the young teen hacker when I was a teen, so I get it.
It's kind of like admiring Lizzie Borden for knowing her way around an axe, though.
Boy, she could really handle that.
If I'm like a professional lumberjack, I might be like, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
I might have gone with a different swing, but I get it.
Imagine what she could do with a piece of wood.
Oh, Patrick.
Terrible.
I'm just saying.
All right, so the kid got snagged. Yeah, so who's going to talk about the SQL Server hack? Who wants that one?
Wait, before we go on to SQL Server.
Okay.
A little bit of hacker advice.
Okay.
This kid, Patrick was joking before this segment that this was probably the fastest speed run in history of getting nabbed. Kid hacks Uber, then kid hacks Rockstar, and then
kid brags about
days
both.
later.
Yeah.
Kid brags about both.
Right. Yeah, honestly, we've had this conversation so many times. Listen, if you're going to be some sort of Uber hacker, pun intended, then you don't go and brag about it. Like, honestly, that is how every single hacker in history has ever been captured, is they go and say, hey, I did this thing.
Bank robbers as well. There's instances where bank robbers have been apprehended because they've bragged about it, and murderers. So
yeah.
Actually, I say they should keep bragging. I think it's a time-honored tradition, and I'd like to see them get caught. So
don't go against the time-honored tradition of being an idiot. Like it. Awesome.
All right.
That advice is so dumb, and I don't mean that you're dumb, Dwayne. I mean that it's just such a no-brainer, that obvious. Don't advertise your crime. That it doesn't even deserve the theme song.
Right.
No.
The theme song has
Just
integrity. It doesn't deserve it.
Right.
Right.
All right, now let's move on to SQL. Who wants it?
Patrick.
You in the first row. So SQL Server hacked in target company ransomware attacks. And so, never a good look when SQL Server gets ransomware is the source of a hack, because SQL Server is really important. If you look at pretty much every application you'll ever use, data is the life's blood of it. I can't think of too many applications where a database of some sort isn't important. Mm-hmm. But you got to keep these things patched, and even then, there's things that emerge. In this case, there's a new wave of attacks with the Fargo ransomware. Okay. It's unclear at the last time I checked whether it was on-prem only or it was affecting in the cloud. I didn't hear it was in the cloud.
Yeah, so this is weird, because if you read through the recommendations here, the recommendation is for Microsoft SQL Server Administrator, and the reason I say read through the recommendations is because a lot of the articles out there right now don't have a lot of detail. I'm always looking for details on the how the service was compromised, because then I can tell, is this going to be an Azure thing? Is this going to be an on-prem thing? Is this going to be whatever? And in this particular case, how the compromise happened is very lax. They go, and they were in, right? And you're like, okay, well, what happened? And trying to reverse engineer from the recommendations. So the recommendation for Microsoft SQL Server administrators is to make sure they use strong enough unique passwords. Additionally, keeping the machine up to date with the latest security fixes and vulnerabilities. So, okay, if we break that down, like obviously this is patch, which we talk about all the time. But in recent memory, I don't know, and we attack SQL Server all the time. I don't know of an exploit off the top of my head that works against a SQL Server that is like a buffer over, like an unauthenticated exploit. Okay. I don't know one, right? So that tends me to think that this was an authenticated exploit. Okay. So if it's an authenticated exploit, how do you authenticate to SQL Server? Typically, there's two different ways. One, you're either using an Active Directory username and password, so you're using Windows authentication. Or two, you're using what's called SQL authentication.
Right.
If it's enabled in the box.
Yeah.
Right. And this recommendation says Microsoft SQL Server administrators should make sure that they use strong, unique passwords. So it could mean they as in their account, or it could mean they as in their SQL Server account. Either way, what this very well may point to is a brute force attack against an open SQL Server on the internet, i.e., port 1433 open to the internet. And they were able to guess the username and password. Unfortunately, hey, for all of you out there, SA is the user and SA is the password. Don't do it.
And that's end game even on the cloud. It doesn't. Yeah.
So
the cloud doesn't protect you from stupid passwords.
Are you saying the cloud doesn't protect stupid?
No.
So
it amplifies it.
It amplifies stupid
amplifier.
So my guess here is, okay, 1433 open, that's a no-no. I've yet to see a design of a website, and Carl, like, by all means, chime in. But I've yet to see a design of a website that leverages a Microsoft SQL Server database that requires 1433 to be open to the internet. I haven't seen it.
No, you don't do that. You may used to have done that. You like my little red thing there used to have done? You might have done that in the past, but no. Now SQL servers are always behind a firewall, and you always have a private connection, between your web server and your SQL server.
We just assumed, Carl, that you're switching between languages now that you're in Oslo, so that your grammar is a little munched.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Go ahead. Yeah. Set me straight if you want.
So my understanding here is this is probably a straight up brute force attack. We see this all the time. Hell, just, throw up port 1433 open to any SQL server and you'll see thousands of attacks per second. Once they get on the SQL server, though, this is the other interesting thing. For those of you who have ever broken into a SQL server, for all of you hackers I'm talking to
pay
right
attention,
now,
hackers.
Once you break into a SQL server, there's a couple different things you can do to gain access to the underlying system. One is flagged by almost every antivirus on the planet, which is enabling XP command shell. It's an extended stored procedure that allows you to run commands.
Not good.
It's disabled by default. There should never be a reason that you have it on. But if it is unfortunately there, it can get enabled. And there are ways of disabling it permanently and making sure it never shows up. However, there are other ways as well. So, they could have taken a .NET binary for a DLL, which is a function that they could load into SQL Server. They could have loaded it up into hex into a table and then tried to load it. So there's some ways you could compromise the system after that, but proper security of the extended stored procedures in SQL will also make it harder for this to happen. But like I said, we don't know how this happened here. We're just assuming probably brute force on your SQL Server username and password.
Or social engineering, that's usually the issue, isn't it?
Right.
Very often.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Could be social engineering in this case as well.
Yeah. Human error. Who knew?
Mm-hmm. It's SQL Server's fault. It didn't know it needed a better password.
Admins don't kill people.
It accepted your password. Blame the victim.
It's like people are my kids. It's never their fault. It was
exactly. All right, Patrick, I think this next one is yours because this is one of the 3 question stories for this week, right?
Yeah. So in the spirit of speed, that is our theme, I guess, today. We've got 2 stories that we have melted down into 3 questions, which should give you everything you need to know. And it lets us get through stuff faster, but it also gets you the answers that you want. So the first one is critical remote code execution vulnerability found in Sophos firewall. And so the first question is, how do you know if you're affected? Well, if you're using a Sophos firewall with a version less than 19.0.1, then you're affected. What do you do if you're affected? Well, you need a patch. There's a patch available. If you have automatic patching enabled, you should be all set, but it's always not a nice thing to do is verify that the patches are there. You didn't have a problem with downloading it or anything. And if the feature's not enabled, then what you can do is disable WAN access to your portal and your web admin, which is really good advice anyways. So hopefully this isn't hitting too many of our listeners. And the last thing is, if a remote attacker can successfully exploit this, they can remote execute commands on your system, which is never a good look. And so those are the 3 for that one. We have another one, which is a new wave of attacks are targeting critical vulnerability in the Magneto e-commerce platform. So if you're using Magneto, you might be affected. So if you use the Adobe Commerce or Magneto open source with a version of 2.4.3 P1 or earlier, or version 2.3.7 P2 and earlier, then it probably affects you. What do you do about it? Well, apply the custom patch released by Adobe onto the Magneto server. So this isn't something you're probably going to get through automatic patching. You're going to have to go get it. And the consequences if you don't do this is it is being exploited in the wild. It's a 9.8 on the CVSS score. And it's considered a remote access Trojan. So that means successful exploitation of this vulnerability allows an attacker to inject a remote access Trojan or RAT into your system. And a RAT gives the attacker full control over your database and any running PHP processes. So these are 2 ones that we'd like you to look out for and make sure that you are free and clear of.
So I have a comment about the firewall, the Sophos firewall issue. First off, you should, I agree with 100%. You should never have the webmin portal. You should never have the admin portal of your VPN or of your firewall accessible to the internet ever, ever, ever. There's no reason to do it. You should use a VPN. So you could VPN into your house or office or whatever, and then hit the admin portal, but you should never have this accessible to the internet. If you do have it accessible to the internet because you don't want to listen to my advice, then you should have it whitelisted where only certain IPs can hit it. Maybe my house can open up that particular webmin. But I say that's still not the best advice. I honestly would not have it turned on.
Or drop us a comment with your IP address and we'll visit you.
Well, yeah, we'll test it out. But
Yes, you can trust us. It's only a trick.
we are
The knives, they're not sharp. They do not penetrate.
You don't feel a thing.
The other thing I think is interesting about this particular article is it's very much like the sequel article. Like it starts with, and they're in. And it's like, okay, well, it's like the first phase of this is attacker breaches firewall. It's like, okay, well, how? Was it a password username and password spray? Or was it an exploit, in the webmin, base for RCE of some sort? Like they don't go into a lot of depth.
It's not specified in the script, Dwayne.
I
don't think we have stage directions in plays that say, and remote code execution exploit successfully.
It's too bad.
I know.
But it is, I do like how they go through what happens next. So somebody compromises my firewall. Yeah. What do I care? I get it. It's bad to have hackers on your firewall. And it's interesting here because they say, okay, well, first things first, attacker's probably going to add a VPN account so they can get access to your internal network and get access to your stuff. That's one thing. But the other thing they're going to do is install, point you at a different DNS server. So every time you go out to the internet, go to bankofamerica.com or whatever, your computer is resolving those addresses through DNS. If they change it to a malicious DNS server at this point, they can do either a reverse proxy or they can man in the middle your traffic to understand which sites you go to. And then also as you authenticate to that site, not only could they potentially see the username and password you use, but if you're using 2FA like we tell you to, the cookie that comes back, they will take that. And now they can use that to authenticate the site and do a 2FA bypass.
You told us about this last week, didn't you? This technique.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's an arms race. It's point counterpoint. Now that MFA, 2FA is becoming ubiquitous, attacks against it are starting to emerge, and we're going to hear more about them. It doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It doesn't mean you still shouldn't use 2FA. It just means that the war has advanced.
Sure. Yep. Agreed. 100%.
Yeah. Are you surprised I used a war metaphor there?
No, but,
What?
Let's talk about the National Cyber Power Index, shall we?
Yeah, this is a report that came out, a study, if you will. And there's actually two of them, but this is one of them that attempted to rank nation states based on their cyber power. We get Janes and military, tank power, things like that, assessments all the time. So they're trying to tease out who are the superpowers, who are the most powerful cyber powers. And surprisingly to most people, not to me, is the United States is number one on the top of both lists. And the reason for that is it's a well-rounded cyber power. The United States, so North Korea is not on the top 10, for example, but they're high in the financial because they supplement their financials by hacking. The North Koreans, one of the major goals of their hacking groups is to get money for the regime because they're being strangled with sanctions. The United States, China, and Russia are the top three, which is not a surprise to a lot of people unless you thought the U.S. was actually getting owned. And Dwayne and I have talked about this in the past. I'm not impressed by the jewel thief who makes headlines by being caught. I'm impressed by the one who I've never heard their name and I never will. And the same is true of hacking. The Russians and the Chinese make a lot of headlines because, they're found in this network. You know which hackers I have more respect for? The ones that are never found. The ones that are never discovered. And so the U.S. is much better at not being caught red-handed. It happens, but they're just better overall in that. And that's why they're at the top of this game. But if you look at the top 10, it's the United States, China, Russia, the United Kingdom, Australia, Netherlands, North Korea, Vietnam, France, and then Iran. Most of those are allies of the United States. And so, you got to think those are working together. So the state of things isn't always as bad as we think. And the person getting the most headlines isn't always the one who's doing the best job of things.
Right. So Ukraine has been in the news, of course, lately because of their advancement we talked about last week. And there are people on YouTube that are doing like a day by day, play by play. Like it looks like a game of Risk, the borders are changing every day. Here's the strategy that Ukraine is doing and what Russia is doing. But in the Cyberscoop article, the headline is Ukraine warns of quote unquote massive cyber attacks coming from Russia on critical infrastructure sites. So Russia's obviously got enough going on to mess with Ukraine in critical infrastructure digitally.
Yeah, they're starting to get down to like, what else do they have? What else can they do? To some extent, this story is newsflash: fall to follow summer. It's
right.
It's kind of obvious. The fact that they know about it, maybe that there's intelligence sharing, and they have moles inside some of these groups. Remember, one of the things that brought down the Conti ransom group was the fact that there was a Ukrainian sympathizer in the group who didn't like the fact that they were taking an anti-Ukraine stance. And you've got to think that there's some intermixing of loyalties in some of these groups, and the Ukrainians are taking advantage of that by using it to foretell what's going to happen. And whenever you foretell what an adversary is going to do, it blunts that attack. It makes it seem like they're less competent.
Yeah, sure.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is we've noticed that Russia's having a really hard time projecting physical force. And if you take a look at the global stage in the cyber world for nation states that have a hard time projecting physical force, they typically then shift over to cyber force. So take a look at North Korea. North Korea doesn't have the boots on the ground military physical force that they can project. So what they do is they really focus on cyber. And I think you start to see, Russia's having a hard time projecting that physical force appropriately. So, of course, they're going to start to fault over to cyber, at least in my opinion, because it's a way that they can have a force multiplier of, a small set of servers and programmers doing a lot more damage because they can't do it in the physical world. That's my take on it. Back to you, Carl.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's it. We need to come up with a theme for this show. What do you think?
I think it's the speed run thing because we had the kid who got arrested and a need for speed.
The need for speed. I love it.
And that applies to patching. You need to patch fast.
Yeah. Patch fast, patch often.
Yes.
All right, guys. Great show.
Yeah.
Have a great time. Safe travels back, Carl.
Yeah, enjoy.
Thanks. I'm coming back tomorrow, so I should sound better next week.
No problem at all. Sound great to me.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.